Our first Advocacy and Action Day panel discussion is important and very timely. How do we advocate and connect with our elected officials during COVID-19? I know it's a question a lot of us have, and luckily, Laura Haynes, Julie Herwick, George Meyer, and Diane Boyle have some answers. Many of you know Diane. She is NAFA's Senior Vice President in Government Relations, and she will be moderating our discussion. Lobbying from the living room, adapting advocacy efforts to COVID-19. Diane, welcome. Thank you. And I'll ask you to introduce your colleague on the panel.
Great. Thank you, Wes. Appreciate that. I'm joined by a few of the sharpest minds in government strategy. Laura Haynes, Guardian Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, Julie Herwig, New York Life Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, and Joyce Meyer, ACLI's Executive Vice President of Government Relations. Before we begin, I have to say, Tom, you gave me a little bit of a heart attack when you started with both sides, when you were talking about the legislators, because I thought you were going to say sides of their mouths, and luckily you said both sides of the aisle, so okay, good point. We do work on both sides of the aisles, and sometimes our legislators do talk out of both sides of their mouths, but we try not to highlight that. As we get started, I'm really excited to have you guys on the panel. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we all prefer to be on the Hill. It's hard for us to sit at home and manage things just like everyone else. But let's get started. Each of you lead a successful government relations department. Can you go through and just briefly describe for our attendees how you traditionally approach accomplishing the legislative efforts and sort of what has changed? And then we'll tee up some questions from there.
Thanks.
Diane, I'm happy. Oh,
go ahead, Julie.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Laura. And thank you, Diane. First, thank you for having me on this panel with this incredible group of women who are not only incredibly talented, but also good friends, as well as you, Diane. And I also, let me just say at the outset that I appreciate the partnership that NAFA has with, New York Life, but the broader industry, including the ACLI. Our partnership together is invaluable and extremely effective. And also, one last thing, I give a shout out to all my New York Life politically engaged agents out there. Grateful to have you join. You asked, kind of how our world's, how we're operating in this environment. And I guess I would, kind of say that, traditionally we've gone up to the Hill, we've, engaged, we've educated members of Congress, we've built relationships. And frankly, that piece hasn't changed. We're still doing that. We're doing it, I'm doing it from my guest bedroom, but it's still happening. And I think, it's all those things. It's reaching out to members of Congress to build relationships, working with their staff to educate them. It's almost more important right now because of the pace of activity and the need to keep folks informed about what's going on. I think maybe the only real significant change is obviously the location, and it's also how we're approaching offices. The staff and the members are so busy and overwhelmed. There's so much going on. There's so many packages coming together so quickly that we really try to work really closely together with colleagues, with Joyce, with Laura, with NAFA, to coordinate our activities so that they're not getting hounded by 15 different calls a day by just different people in the industry. Just really trying to stay coordinated and strategic in the way that we approach our advocacy now.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Julie has said. I think the pace of change has been a bit of a surprise for all of us. And then the conflation of the federal and the state and the local levels. I think that pace and making sure that there's significant coordination, not only between your internal executives, but also your external partners. I think, as Julie mentioned, location has been a bit of a challenge, and so covering a lot of ground quickly has come in the shape of working closely with our partners, be it ACLI or NAFA or our agents directly. It's been really important.
Yeah, hi everybody, and so thrilled to be here, both on a panel of great women, and also with all of you and watching the
Joyce, do you want to
chat
add
messages.
to that?
Yes, that would be great. I was going to say too, this has all been so fantastic to be with all of you. I see in the chat we've got Wisconsin on the line here, and it's been great to see all of the different states chiming in. You are all really well served by your leadership at NAFA, and I know many of you, I've met with many of you most recently in my previous life on the Hill. You know, advocacy now in COVID-19 has been very, it's been challenging, but as Julie and Laura said, it really hasn't changed because the dialogues are still there. As we all know, advocacy isn't limited to just going to the Hill. It's not limited to just in-person meetings and such. Because all of these relationships have been cultivated, the dialogue is, it's pretty seamless when you continue. It's just not in person. And, you know, I do miss seeing everybody. I miss seeing all of my counterparts from the member companies. I miss seeing all of my colleagues at work, but connecting on at a different level with COVID-19, you know, you can imagine there are personal connections just because everyone is in it together. So everyone, you already start with a common, area of common space where everyone is having to do this from remote locations. And even though I would have loved to have seen everybody, we always looked forward to seeing the NAFA agents come in my previous life. It was a huge show of force, and the entire Hill always saw everybody there when you'd come to the Capitol to meet with policymakers and staff. The show of force can continue. We're just continuing to have these individual dialogues, and all of you are uniquely positioned back home as well to continue those dialogues too. So many thanks again for including me.
Thanks, Joyce, and you tee it up perfectly. So my next sort of question or topic would be, you know, how do the agents fit into the industry's efforts to shape policy, and why is it important for them to become involved? I think as all of you have said, we've shifted how we interact with the Hill. The Hill has shifted how they interact with us and with constituents. But why is it important for those agents to be involved?
I think agents have a unique lens on the local economy and on the local, on Main Street America. And as much as I think members of Congress are trying to be accessible to folks, there's just, there's few points that have really resonated and long-term lens on really important areas of the economy, not just business, but retirement savings, health insurance. I think it's uniquely situated in a NAFA member and someone that can provide both early warning, but also a broader view of what the necessary steps are to rebuilding in this COVID-19 economy. I think taking that pulse of Main Street for a member of Congress or a member of the state legislature is really important. And so I would encourage NAFA members to definitely engage with their local offices.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is such an important and critical point when it comes to advocacy. As I mentioned, agents you're uniquely qualified and positioned because you make policy issues into local community issues. You know, in my previous job, I had worked as chief of staff to Paul Ryan in his Washington, D.C. office. I happened to be, you know, he was my hometown congressman. So many of the agents that would come in to meet are people that I knew from my neighborhood growing up. I would say though that when agents would talk to Paul back home in Wisconsin, Many times it's the additional dimension of how the issue affects constituents in the local district directly. And that's where that kind of connection to the member, particularly COVID-19 members have been forced to stay in their home districts. So they already have a more sensitivity to the local issues back home and the difficulties, facing many of our communities. Hearing directly from you and their, as well as their staff, it always turns into an action item because you are the constituent and because you are making the issue a local issue. It turns into an action item for further review, for further research for the staff, and it's because it creates a result as well. So this is why all of you are just so uniquely and critical, uniquely qualified and critical to the advocacy voice for all of the policies and issues facing our industries.
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, I'll just state the obvious. I mean, it's kind of building off of what Joyce said. Your member of Congress works for you. They don't work for any of us up on here on the screen. You're the voter, and you are a center of influence in your community, particularly as an insurance agent who meets with thousands of their constituents every year. So they want to make you happy, and so you have something that none of the rest of us do, and that they truly want to work for you and make you and meet your needs.
Yeah, you notice how we all smiled when you said that, because they're all too quick to remind us of that. Tell me what the folks back home have to say. I understand what you're telling me, but what do the constituents have to say? In NAIFA and the folks here are well represented because we can turn and say we do have somebody in your district who can reinforce what we're saying. Which sort of leads into my next question. Many of our members have established relationships with their members of Congress. They know them well. They either went to school or they developed those relationships when they were in the state houses, and those relationships just kind of grew when they came to Congress. But for some of the attendees who want to become more involved, what do they need to do? Do they need to be a tax or a policy expert to get started?
This is such an important question because we definitely need more folks who want to become more involved. First things first, definitely don't need to be an expert in the specific policy, tax policy or otherwise. What you bring to the table that is you're a valuable resource of information to the member of Congress, to the policymaker, to the staffer. Why? Because you bring a story with the policy. I can tell you from my own direct experience from the advocacy that many of you have already done, anytime, going back to the point I made about anytime there is contact made with the member of Congress, it always turns into an action item that requires additional research. When that's passed on to the staffer, it always comes with the story that was told about a constituent back home and how this affects the constituent, how it makes it affordable to the constituent, how it makes it more accessible, how it becomes a solution for their constituents. So that's what triggers the action item. It's not the level of expertise to talk about engine parts of a policy that triggers the action item.
And Joyce put it very well. And the only thing I would add too is don't be, put off if you don't have a strong relationship now. It builds up over time. It's just like with a prospect or somebody that you're working with. Like it can take, years to have that really close relationship. It's just a matter of putting in the time and again when you're able to participate in fly-ins, do local district meetings, do fundraisers if you're able to. It's just a repetitive sort of thing that over time it becomes very natural, and then you have the credibility and the relationship with members to just have a tremendous impact.
The next thing that I'd like to sort of discuss is obviously everything has turned to COVID-19. So there's a lot of goodwill that's being done right now. And goodwill in a time of crisis not only does good, but it builds that credibility. It can build those relationships. Each of your organizations is doing a lot of goodwill right now. I'd like for, if you're willing, to share a little bit about how the industry is establishing goodwill and how that will ultimately benefit our advocacy efforts in the policy arena.
So I'll start. I think having the ability to share what you're putting out to the community, or how you're helping policyholders, especially in a crisis environment, is enormously helpful. And to be able to go to a member of Congress and share that good news, I think is really important. You're not asking for anything in a crisis. It's, we want to tell you about what we're giving. And to that end, Guardian has put forward a Work Life Matters program, which is our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program, to all 90,000 small businesses that we insure, which is about 2.3 employees at no cost to those employers. So we just think it's really important at this point to step up. And I know ACLI is working to collect great stories, and you'll hear from Joyce and Susan in a bit. But I think it's really important to talk about what the industry is doing.
Yeah, and I would just build on what Laura was saying. One, just big picture, we're in a pandemic. I mean, this is what the life insurance industry does. And, we are meeting people's needs. You on the ground are meeting the needs of your clients, providing them peace of mind during the time of, historic and unprecedented need. So I think the industry remains strong and does what it's doing now, really just serving the purpose that it was established for. That will go a long way just by itself, because it shows what we're all about. I also wanted to say, New York Life, like many other companies, has also stepped up in this environment. We joined with Cigna and a few other companies to create what we hope will be a $100 million fund that will provide grants to the survivors of people, medical workers, first responders who lost their lives due to the fight against COVID. Again, this is one of many examples, but as Laura mentioned, the reaction from members of Congress, we did not do it by any means for members of Congress. We did it for these, people who are sacrificing and putting so much on the line to help save and fight this crisis. But the reaction from members of Congress has been overwhelmingly, positive, because they're hearing, unlike the rest of us, they spend their days, talking to people. You guys actually, it's very similar, and you hear, there's just the stories of just tremendous need and trauma in the community, and so they're very grateful to see companies stepping up and doing their part during this horrendous crisis.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is, you'll be hearing from Susan Neely, our CEO, in regards to all of the great work that all of you, as well as our member companies, are doing in this during these difficult times. The one thing I would say is that for many members as well as staff, their starting point in terms of you as an agent and as a fixture in the community is they know that you're there during many of the life events. And so the fact that they know that already, they listen to what you have to say through that lens. I'll speak a little bit to that in terms of how that goodwill and the fact that you're there for people is so powerful. When I was 15 years old, my brother, who was 13 at the time, was riding his bike and was struck and killed instantly. It was a really dark time for our family in Franklin, Wisconsin. As you can imagine, I can remember everybody who came to our home. As a 15-year-old, I didn't really, it was bewildering and very difficult. Two of the people that came to our home were our Catholic priest and our Catholic deacon. And they came to comfort my mom and dad. And our deacon happened to be our family's insurance agent. And in this horribly dark moment in our lives, our insurance agent, our deacon and insurance agent, reminded my parents that they have a small life insurance policy for my brother. And it was a moment of relief during tremendous grief, where this agent basically, lessened the burden so that my parents would not have to worry about burial costs during this unexpected, horrible tragedy. I didn't even know what life insurance was, back then. That moment, and with the agent being there for our family, that I carried that with me in all my time on the Hill. As you can imagine, it's a difficult thing to talk about, but this is why I say, and I feel so strongly and committed to the work that all of you do, is that I carry that with me in my time. And so anytime agents would come and meet with our team, that's always what I remembered, is how all of you are always there for families in moments like that, happy and tremendously sad moments, including COVID-19. It's why it means so much to me, not only to be here with you, but also to be working for an industry and among agents that are so committed and motivated to make sure that everything we do, everything we advocate, is so that we are there in that moment for the family when they need it most. So it's, and the same goes for COVID-19 right now. So I really salute you and all the work that you do and how powerful your role is in advocacy in the communities, as well as the message that you deliver. So thank you.
And thank you, Joyce. I know it's always tough telling those stories, and we really appreciate it. It is what our guys do. If you watch the chat while you were talking, all of them hit it, and it's like, yeah, that's why we're here. This is what we do. And I think it really demonstrates, and that's why we have this panel together, is you have to tell those stories. It doesn't necessarily have to be your personal story. Tell what you do for your clients. You do this every day. And that's the difference that the agents can make, is by bringing those stories. And I'd ask you guys on the panel to sort of talk about why it's important to share that with staff as well. Joyce, obviously you knew because you had a personal experience, but do the other staffers need to know that? Is it enough that just the member knows? Talk a little bit about getting that message out.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for the staff to know and understand, because to the staffer, for example, they are looking at the work in front of them as, okay, I got to get this briefing material together. I got to make sure that I pull together this research. What you're providing is not exactly research, it's impact. And it's the impact that goes with the policy. So talking about those moments when you're there for the new family, realizing, they just had a baby and they got to get their financial house in order, in those bright moments of time, and being there as the children grow up. Many of the staffers, I'm sure, will grow up seeing many of you in their communities. They see the presence that you have. Everybody laughs at me, but to me, the agents growing up were the names on my brother's Little League jersey, on the back of his jersey, because they sponsored the Little League team. It's that core presence that you have in the communities, and making that connection of our policies to the staffer, and drawing from their own experiences in their own communities is, it's not only powerful, but it makes it relevant, so it's not, and stand out. So it's not just one of the tasks they need to get done that day. It stays with them.
And I think just building on what Joyce said, I think some of it is context for them. Many of them, particularly on Capitol Hill, are quite young, probably single, probably don't have a family yet. They have their federal group life insurance, but nothing really beyond that. So some of the concepts that you want to share with them will be somewhat new. And so I think that ability to put it into plain English and about the importance and what will really be the glue that makes that stick is the story.
And I would just add, you know, for those of you who've been doing this for a long time, you realize this, but the staff are just as important as the members of Congress. You know, as Joyce was saying, they write the memos, they provide the recommendations. And not only that, those staff very quickly, like if you're meeting with somebody that looks like your child or even your grandchild, like don't worry about it. They will move up quicker than, you know, you can believe it. And one day they'll be chief of staff to Paul Ryan, and you will have had a relationship, and you'll, you know, they will remember how you treated them way back when. So, you know, as everyone said, those stories are really important to bringing it to life, and just treat those, you know, those meetings just as you would with a member, because it will matter a lot, you know, and, you know, in the near term and in the long term.
Thank you all for participating. We're getting close to the end of our time. If there's anything that you'd like to say in closing before we hand this off, we're going to go into and delve a little bit, Julie, into what you just brought up, which is, you know, how do you develop those relationships? How do you work on making sure that the staff understands just as well as the member, because they are carrying it back. They're not going to be, the member isn't going to be an expert in every field, and they're going to rely on their staff regardless of whether they look like your grandkids or not. Any parting words, or should I simply thank you?
Thank you. Thank you to all the agents out there. As I said, your partnership and, you know, friendship and the work that you do is so valuable. Much appreciated. Thank you.
And I would echo that and just say there's a lot of ideas swirling right now, people trying to put good policy into practice and don't understand the knock-on effects. And I think you can really help guide them and be a resource. So thank you for all that you do. We really appreciate it.
No, I want to echo my gratitude as well, and tremendous respect for everything you do, your commitment to your clients, to the work you do, to your communities. It is, there's a rich amount of action and focus that you bring, and we're just very grateful for the continued partnership, and particularly during this difficult time. So thank you.
And thank you all for participating. Very much appreciate you carving out some time to spend with us today. Next up, we're actually going to hear from some members of Congress. What we'll do is put in the chat box too some of their social media handles. If you want to thank them after you hear them, if they're your member, that's a good way to further develop that relationship too. No member of Congress doesn't enjoy a thank you thrown his or her way. So with that, we'll turn it over. Again, thank you all. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk to you soon.